Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside Ashley Mailloux, producer Bobby helping us out with a very interesting race we're going to preview, Ashley. This is the Sunday race of the day over at Churchill Downs. It's the Grade 3 Matt Winn. Remember, for every race of the day, you can get free past performances at DRF.com. This one's really interesting because you have 5 from the Derby. We're recording this before the Belmont has even run, and you can get a big savings on the Belmont Stakes packages. Bundle them all together, past performances, clocker reports, betting strategies, and more. I feel like I'm kind of like going back in time here, right? Like I'm hopping in the DeLorean, back to the future. Now we're going back before the Belmont Stakes here, when this is really the Sunday race of the day. What's interesting about this race, though, Ashley, kind of curious why some of the barns chose to run maybe in an easier spot, or what they thought would be an easier spot, the Matt Winn, versus running in the Belmont this weekend. I mean, horses like Final Gambit, who was 4th in the Kentucky Derby, horses like Burnham Square, who had legitimate trouble in the Kentucky Derby when he finished 6th. You feel like they may have been at least like side contenders, partial contenders in a race like this. So they'll try to run in the Matt Winn instead, and we end up getting 5 horses from the Kentucky Derby showing up in here.
Yeah, maybe it's just strategic. I don't know. Some of these horses obviously train in Kentucky. Let's run out of your backyard. Grade 3, it's $400,000 for a grade 3, which is pretty good purse money when you look at a grade 3 event. So I think there are reasons maybe to bypass Saratoga. Maybe you don't want to go a mile and a quarter right now. Maybe you want to go a mile and a 16th and figure out, for some of these horses, what do they really want to do? I think that could be the case with Gaming. He's been fine at 2 turns. He's been good at 1 turn. This is, a little bit of a different ball game. Now he's got to go back to 2 turns. Is he going to like that? I think this is a nice sort of distance to figure out what the rest of your year looks like.
So let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector. And as you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording it, the pace and the mile and a 16th is what makes this race a little tricky. If it was going a little longer, like a mile and an 1/8, I think we could feel better about certain horses and maybe colder on others. But at that mile and a 16th, I think Burnham Square is the best horse in this field, and maybe the horse who will go down and have the best career at the end of the year. But I don't know if a mile and a 16th is necessarily his best distance, Ashley.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it worked out in the Holy Bull, but you look at his other races, especially like the Bluegrass, he needed every bit of the mile and an 1/8. So it really comes down to the pace. And you can see here, Timeform points out it favors front runners. It doesn't expect necessarily a hot pace. And that's where East Avenue with the outside draw. His Bluegrass performance was pretty good, if you ask me, considering about how he had to be used into the run into the first turn, and to see that he only came up a nose short. And I think I know Gaming could be here with Coal Battle. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I think Gaming is a little bit quicker than maybe this suggests.
Let's meet the field for this one. As you pointed out, $400,000 up for grabs in the grade 3. Matt Winn going a mile and a 16th. Gaming was the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. Since then, he's been 0 for 4. Now, he's been in the money 3 of the 4 races. One of the races in the Southwest, he just didn't really fire. It's not like he's progressed very much, though. He's kind of been running the same sort of races. Now, all that being said, that still might be good enough to be really competitive in here. Like those mid-90 buyer speed figures would probably be a really solid fit against a group like this. And I imagine he sits a solid trip from the inside. I'm just not quite sure like who he is at this point anymore, or what really to expect from him. What do you think about Gaming?
Well, I think his connections are trying to figure that out as well, right? They tried the mile. 1-turn mile, the Pat Day mile, and he was 3rd best. He almost beat Madaket Road. So in my opinion, that 2nd and 3rd weren't that different in that race. It was just that Macho Music was much the best. I've just wanted to see more from him. And I'll be honest, I didn't like him in the Southwest. And I know he had a ton of trouble in the Southwest, and he's regrouped well since then. But to me, how short of a price do you want to take on Gaming in here? I do think, though, he has early foot and he draws the inside. And we saw the Timeform pace projections. I think you take a short price on Gaming if you really think he's going to be involved early and be able to stay in front.
Final Gambit was so impressive winning the Jeff Ruby Stakes, and he jumped up and improved his buyer speed figure by a ton. I think a lot of people were wondering, was that just a one race thing? Is he going to be able to like step forward off of that? He absolutely did in the Kentucky Derby. He ran his race, Ashley. It was a very good 4th. He just ran into a couple of horses that are a little bit better than him. That couple are a little more tactical than him, but I don't have any knocks on that whatsoever. He's a grade 3 winner. He's a big late closer, and he actually gets Flavien Prat to jump aboard and come over and ride for Brad Cox. I think you always have to see that as a positive when Flavien Prat's going to jump aboard, because he probably has his pick of very many horses and locations where he can go to ride on big weekends like this. So yeah, he feels like one they're going to have to hold off. I'm just a little bit worried about the race shape in here. I don't know if they're going to be flying and lining up on the lead like they were for him in the Derby.
Yeah, he's a deep closer. That's the concern for him. I think he's extremely talented, and he's shown that in his last two. And this is a horse that 3 starts back when he graduated. You go to the Derby, you jump 35 points. Is insane to see his progression. But a horse that I think also has appreciated the added distance. I think there's a concern here. Is a mile and a 16th too short for him? And do they not go fast enough?
Let's go to Chunk of Gold. One of those really cool horses that you root for. This horse was a $2,500 purchase and made it into the Kentucky Derby. He has multiple graded stakes placed. For a lot of horses, you can probably put a line through the Kentucky Derby. It's not really the race you want to gauge and use to sort of talk about who they are and what their running styles are. His races in the Louisiana Derby, though, and the Risen Star were solid. And from a trip standpoint, I could actually see him getting a decent trip in here, Ashley, because I think he's got a little more positional speed than horses like Final Gambit and Burnham Square. I could see him being ahead of them and maybe moving ahead of them. So I could see him getting a trip, but at this point, he still is just a one. He still is a non-winners of 2. He still has just that one career victory. So we need to see him get into the winner's circle a couple more times against groups like this.
Yeah, and it's tough because you look at his second career start. I thought he was rolling late, and big difference going from 6 furlongs to a mile in the next start, right? And then you look at his Risen Star, Magnitude. We know what Magnitude did. It was just kind of earth-shaking how good he was in there. And then Louisiana Derby, I agree with what you're saying about how he showed that he could be more tactical. I mean, maybe he has the jump on a couple others in this spot in the Matt Winn, and I think that is key. I really loved his Louisiana Derby personally. I think that was my favorite race from him so far.
Just a Fair Shake is next one up. This is a horse who I'm becoming a big fan of. I think he's a little bit faster than some of his speed figures would suggest. We can watch his most recent race in the Cert Barton. He didn't really have a shot more than finishing second in this one, Ashley, because Crudo was just loose on the front end and did not get a whole lot of a pressure up there. But Just a Fair Shake, if you go through his overall body of work, he never runs a bad race. He's just a late closer. He's kind of a grinder that sort of grinds up into it. Things really need to go his way for him to win. I really liked his effort in the Tessio behind Pay Billy 2 starts back, and I thought this was fine. He was well defeated. He just didn't really have much of a chance in this race.
No, I mean, Crudo was just sensational, and the other horse, Invictus, who took a lot of support, was still several lengths behind this runner. So I think it speaks a little bit to his ability. I agree with you. I think he's interesting in this spot. I don't really know how good he is. The Federico Tessio you mentioned, it was a good performance, right? I think in terms of the trip, he got tested a little bit more than he did in his prior starts, but can't really knock him. I commend them for taking a shot here and seeing what they have, and we'll see what trip he gets. He was dead last in the Sir Barton in that short field. 2 starts back, he was more towards the back, but you look at his other races, he's been mid-pack, so it's tough to say.
Burnham Square is next up. He's a grade 1 winner, a multiple graded stakes winner, and he did have legitimate trouble in the Kentucky Derby last time out. I think looking at his overall resume, Ashley, I think he's the most accomplished. I think he's the most consistent. He very rarely runs a bad race. The 2 races that you would say were bad were when he finished 4th in the Fountain of Youth behind Sovereignty, River Thames, and Neo Equus, and he didn't even run that poorly that day. And then in the Derby when he had legitimate trouble. So I think he's really honest. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to come running late.
Yeah, and I think Brian Hernandez has learned a lot about him. The Derby was a learning process. I still think he ran okay, considering the Bluegrass was a beautifully timed ride. When you look at East Avenue coming up a nose short, but this guy, when you look at this gelding, he was at the back of the pack and was able to roll. So I agree with what you say. I think he has a really bright future and probably the one to watch going forward. We'll see how the mile and a 16th works, and we'll see how Churchill works. I mean, it's tough. His only other race outside of the Derby, he was 3rd, and I thought that was a very impressive performance. That was his 2nd career start. So I think very highly of him. Just is going to come down to trip again. I feel like so many in here, it comes down to trip because there isn't a ton of speed signed on.
No, and then some of them are deeper closers. I guess one of the more versatile horses could be Cole Battle. Maybe he could sit a nice trip. We have both of the horses with Cole Battle and Chunk of Gold, who were kind of the rags to riches stories in the Derby that were the fun, feel-good stories. And Cole Battle goes out for Small Barn, Lonnie Briley. won the grade 2 Rebel after winning the Smarty Jones, third in the Arkansas Derby, and then just doesn't really get to run his race in the Kentucky Derby. But the form before that was very good. What do you think about Cole Battling here?
I like him a bit. I've always been a big fan of this horse. Obviously, his resume speaks to himself. Even his turf races, the one turf race was pretty good at Kentucky Downs. And I know the next one didn't turn out the same for him, but they got him back on the dirt. He was in great form. Arkansas Derby. Lonnie, there were a lot of quotes after that race about maybe not having him geared up for that race in the right way. And I don't think it helped him when you go back to the Arkansas Derby in his performance. I think when he saw Cornucopian go, he got really keen to go. And I think that worked against him. This is a shorter field. I think mile and a 16th won't be an issue for him. Be curious to see what tactics they use. I mean, if the fractions aren't all that fast, which is what we saw in time for him, they showed him tracking maybe in second or third. That's realistic. I mean, I know his gate to wire win is when they were crawling, but I think Corey Liner is going to climb aboard for the second time. He'll be able to kind of tell those fractions early and see where everyone breaks and maybe put him into gear or maybe have him rate. I think he's handy.
And we round out the field with East Avenue, who on paper looks like the one they'll all have to catch. I like the outside draw for him too, Ashley, because they can kind of get out of the gate and then look over and make sure, is anyone else trying to go? Is anyone else trying to get aggressive? Is that like gaming maybe from the inside, trying to hold that position? And if not, East Avenue can go. He got back to his form this year in the Bluegrass. That's the kind of race we were looking for him again, just to make sure he wasn't just one of those horses who was really precocious at 2 and doesn't really have any of that left. He just sort of needs the trip. He needs to be on the front. He wants to be pushing the pace. Even if they go a little faster early, that's fine with him if he can clear and then he can relax a little bit. So with the outside draw, he's probably the one they'll all have to catch and beat. So Ashley, as we move to selections here, how are you going to stack him up in the Matt Winn?
Part of me wonders if you need to put the speed on top in here. And I still went back to who I thought had the best, races and figures under their belt. It is Burnham Square. He's going to need the setup, and it'll really come down to Brian Hernandez. You don't want to be last in this field, I don't think. And you kind of look at the Holy Bull. He broke last, but in that race, he kind of moved a little bit along in that race, right? He was picking up horses. I think that's what you need to do in here. You can't be sitting out the back, turning for home and thinking you're going to pass them all. I don't think they're going to go that quick, but he's on top for me. You use him in second. You use East Avenue, who makes it in here. I mean, the race probably goes through the outside runner.
Yeah, and I think that Burnham Square is the horse to beat. I basically put the two that I think are probably the best with the highest ceilings on top, and then some of the others who I feel like will be making up ground late in Final Gambit and in Chunk of Gold. So that's a look at the grade 3 Matt Winn on Sunday. Ashley, I have to give you a ton of credit. I think you were able to make it through like 11 or 12 video recordings with me this week. That's a lot of Gino that you had to deal with. So feather in your cap, Ashley, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend gambling.
We survived. It was a lot of fun along the way, and I'm sure we'll be back together at some point next week, but best of luck to you too, Gino.
And good luck to everyone else out there. A big thanks to producers Bobby and Lucia for helping us out on a really busy week, which is Belmont Stakes week. But we're already past the Belmont. We're already on to Sunday here with the grade 3 Matt Winn. Good luck.